afternoon, everyone. Here today with this fourth webinar with David Collier from Australia. For him, it's very early in the morning over there. Thank you, David, to be that early now today. David Collier, he is from Victoria in Australia. He has been working with the agriculture industry for many years, and he's the general manager of the Feedtech feeding systems. So since many years, he was interested to be supporting farmers, especially small farmers, small ruminant farmers, to be more profitable, especially with the feeding of the animals. So he will be sharing information about Australia and also how they were approaching that problem and how they will be growing as an enterprise. And also by the end of his presentation, I saw that he's looking for some partnerships here in the United States. So cool. So you're very welcome, David. So just go ahead and start. You want to say something else about yourself? You can do it, and just go ahead, please.
Yep, no worries at all. Look, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to be able to speak. It's not something we do very often. We go to a lot of field days, expos, and we present our equipment at those. But it's not very often we get the chance to get up in front of a crowd. And this is a little bit different. This is via webinar as well, so I can't walk around and point at things which I normally like to do. So as far as America said, I've been working in the agricultural industry since 1987. Originally started in ag machinery dealerships, John Deere, as well as Case IH, before moving to the manufacturing side approximately 9 years ago. And I started working for Feedtech Feeding Systems. Feedtech Feeding Systems has been going since 1995. And we originally used to make feed systems for the dairy industry, which we still do. But in 2017, we diversified our business and went into designing manufacturing auto feeders for the sheep and goat industry here in Australia, which I'll go through in detail. Unfortunately, it is all PowerPoint presentation, so hopefully it's not death by PowerPoint. But I think there'd be some very good information here, what we found when we had drought over here, what the farmers had to do over here, and how we overcome it. And from there, we've moved to the other side. So there is definitely some similarities with what's going over in the States at the moment. So I'll move on. So just a little bit of history about the Australian sheep market. There was a few different facts and figures here. I went for the lowest one, which is basically saying at the moment, Australia's got an estimated of about 67.1 million sheep in Australia. We are the third largest flock in the world, and we are the largest meat exporter in the world as well, which sometimes that will flip between Australia and New Zealand. It just depends on what the seasonal market is. And at the moment in 2024, in production, we had 665,000 tonne of lamb. So that was a huge number. I do have some goat information as well, which I'll go through. But in Australia, the goat industry isn't as big as what it is in the States. I travelled to the States in 2024 and spent a fair bit of time in Texas. And I sort of really learnt there that, the goat industry is very important as well. So with the Australian sheep industry, as I said previously, our flock is estimated about 67.1 million at the moment. And interesting to note, I went back into the 1970s. At one stage, we had a flock size of 180 million, which is absolutely huge. 2020, 2024, our flock did decline. Roughly by about 2.7%. We just had some challenging seasonal conditions. The lamb prices fell away as well. So that's sort of when sort of things like that happen, is normally when our business actually gets busy. If it's drought, we tend to get busy because people are looking at different ways of feeding their sheep and goats here in Australia. Even though we've got 67.1 million estimated sheep in Australia, and we are the largest exporter in the world, it's funny to note that our sheep numbers account for about 6% in the overall flock around in the world, with China being 183 million, India being 115 million, and as I said, Australia is 67.1. But we export a lot of our sheep, where in China and India they have it for their domestic market. And interesting to also note that, yeah, Australia also produces about 25% of the world's wool supply as well. On the goat side of things, I couldn't get a lot of data. At the moment, we're estimated between 4 to 6 million goats in Australia, which is about approximately the third largest flock in the world. And we export a lot of our goats as well. But a lot of our goats are actually free range goats. So large parts of land in the northern part of Australia, it's natural free ranging goats where they'll breed. They'll go on to, I might call them farmers sometimes, but ranchers. They'll go on the rancher's property, and then they will actually round them up and send them off the market. So there's no real cost involved for the rancher, but then there are some goat producers as well that also run their own particular meat goats for our domestic market here as well. So a lot of our demand is underpinned by what is actually happening overseas with our goats. The goat market can fluctuate a fair bit. Export destinations is the United States, where about 54% of the Australian goat market tends to go. And then we also send goats to South Korea, China, as well as Canada. And yeah, our domestic market is heavily driven by our multicultural countries communities we've got here in Australia, which is South Asian, Caribbean, and North African backgrounds as well. With our product, the Feedtech auto feeder, that sort of really came about in 2017. We had a really bad drought here in Australia, and farmers were looking at different ways of being able to feed their sheep. And so I started to receive a lot of phone calls from farmers going, look, we want to look at feeding our sheep differently. We want to look at not just what we call here in Australia trail feeding. Trail feeding is where they'll just go out into the paddock. They'll just drop feed into the paddock, normally a small grain. They'll drop that into the paddock, and the sheep will just flow along and eat the grain off the ground. But what happens when that happens is that because they've still got the ability to walk around their paddocks, the sheep are losing conditions. And that's when the Australian farmer's got to make that decision. Do they keep the sheep, or do they offload them? And hence we were getting a lot of phone calls with people looking at going, righto, we want to look at doing something with our feeding pattern. We want to have something automated, which over here in Australia, the poultry industry, the piggery industry and the dairy industry is very automotive. So we came up with what we call our auto feeder, which is very similar to what you're going through in the States at the moment. You've got drought across a large portion of the States. When we went over there in 24, we spent 2 weeks in Texas, and we didn't see many sheep in Texas. We're actually quite surprised. There was quite a few goats still, but as we were talking to some local people over there, the sheep were probably the first animal to go when things started to get tight, and that was very similar here in Australia as well. So from from the drought in 2017, it was the farmers over here had to make that decision. Did they want to hold on to their flock? Did they want to sell their flock? If we were to look at some type of confinement feeding, what could they do? What equipment was out and around that they could use to feed their flock as well? And that's sort of where we came into it with our purpose-built auto feeder, which is fully automated. And by using a product like ours as well, over here, our labour market's very hard. Years ago, we used to get a lot of backpackers into Australia. A lot of the farmers were able to get labour very easy and very cost-effective labour. But we're finding that very hard here in Australia now. So they were really looking at the labour content of how they could feed their sheep and not be so labour intensive. They're looking at the way that they were feeding the sheep as well. They wanted something where it's a bit more consistent feeding, not so ad lib, and it was all the feed could be delivered on time as well, and every time when they want it. By using a feed system like ours as well, because it's falling into a trough system, the wastage just wasn't there, which was, we found that was amazing. Like, we would go to our auto feeders, there'd be no wastage on the ground, but yet if they were trail feeding out in the paddock, you tend to be losing approximately 30% of your feed when you're trail feeding into the paddock. So that becomes a huge cost as well by just doing that. So there was a real mind shift in what the farmers in Australia were doing. We had to look at a different way of feeding. So from when that we initially were getting those phone calls in 2017, they were looking at a way that they could keep their flock, but also feed them at a competitive price. So we're looking at alternatives, and that's where the Australian farmer really made that mindset. They made the change of the way that they wanted to feed instead of just getting rid of the flock. And sometimes getting rid of the flock is either selling them at very cheap pricing, so you're not making any money, or it was also, unfortunately, they would go around and they would unfortunately have to shoot their flock because they just couldn't afford to keep them, and the pricing just wasn't there. So with the idea of the auto feed, it was a really, producers could see exactly what their sheep are eating. They could have the mix, because normally in drought as well, the grain pricing normally comes back as well. So it ends up being very cost effective to feed grain. So by doing the feed system that we have, they could really, there was definitely more control with the feed that they were doing. They could manage the way that the amount of times that they want to fed per day, how much feed they fed per day. It means that they had the ability to not have flocks running over their pastures or over their paddocks. Through the drought, there's nothing there anyway. And then from there was that real mindset. We got over that drought, and a big key word here in Australia is called confinement feeding. So there was a real shift after the drought to look at the way that they were feeding their sheep and preserve their paddocks. So there was two things with our auto feeders. One was confinement feeding. So that's literally getting them off their pastures, resting their pastures, and putting them in the pens. You'll see that top picture there. There's some pens there. So they'll put them in pens, and they would be with the system. They would go, yeah, look, we want to feed once a day or twice a day, because it's really about maintaining. They weren't looking to put weight on and to go to market. It was really about just maintaining their weight. So they could feed once a day, they could feed twice a day, just depending on what they really wanted to do. And we went to a conference 2 years ago in Adelaide called LambX, and it's and confinement feeding was definitely something that was being talked about a lot more. There was a lot more information about confinement feeding as well. And even traveling around the countryside years ago, where you would see a lot of stock roaming around paddocks, they were tending them now to have them into confinement pens. And that, which, like I said previously, it would then give them the opportunity to rest their paddocks. So really, with the system that we sell, and there are other units on the market as well, we had the ability here in Australia. They had the ability to confinement feed and drought feed, but with that same unit as well, when the market did turn around, those confinement feeding areas then turn into feedlot or lamb finishing areas. Because here in Australia and worldwide as well, there's a real protein shortage. So the idea is to do a lot more trading with their lambs. So they might use their own breeders, or they will just go out to the marketplace. We have our regular sale days, various regions around Australia, and we also have a couple of other different online facilities where you can buy stock online, and one of those online places is called Auction Plus. So with the confinement feeding, the goal definitely is to just maintain your condition. With the ration itself, it's a maintenance ration. It's what you want to put out per head, and you could just feed your once or twice a day. The trough system, they all had the ability to get onto the trough system. But funny enough, with our trough systems, our units come in 10-foot trough length. So we could sell a system from 10 foot long to 120 foot long. And then it's really the type of feeding determines what head spacing you will have on that trough system. So when you are confinement feeding, because of the units only coming on once or twice a day, when that unit comes on, they all want to get to that trough. So hence, the head spacing for confinement feeding or drought feeding is about 6 inches per head, or over here in Australia, 15 centimetres. So on that 10-foot trough length, for confinement feeding or drought feeding, you would fit 40 head on that trough system. You're feeding from both sides. Where if you're actually finishing lambs or feedlotting, because the unit is coming on a lot more, because the idea with feedlotting is fattening those lambs up. You're putting them into pens. You're inducting them for anywhere from 7 to 14 days. Then every day you bump the ration up. You bump the ration, and after about 45 days, they've got their weight, and then they're off to market. So with that, because they've got the ability to have feed all the time, the head spacing on a trough, on a 10-foot trough, is only 2 inches per head. So all of a sudden on that 10-foot trough, you've got the ability to fit 120 head, versus when you're confinement feeding, you can only fit 40 head on that. So there is that two distinct type of feeding. And yeah, originally when we came up with the unit, it was all about confinement feeding. It was all about drought feeding. But then as we've gone along and we've got out of that drought, feedlotting in Australia has become a very economical way of finishing your lambs. And I actually went out to a property yesterday. I took a client out there not far from where I am. I'm at a conference at the moment, or today is the first day of the conference, and I took a client out there to show him a unit, and that particular customer has got a 100-foot unit, and he was saying through his cycle, it was costing him per head, it was costing him $38 a head by the time they bought it, and then the feed amount they were putting in, it was $38. So they were making 100. No, sorry, they were making $70 a head. So um, they didn't actually trade. They were using their own breeders. So sorry, yeah, go back. So yeah, they didn't trade. So they were using their own feeders. So it was costing them $38 a head, and they could sell them at market. So they were very happy with the profits they were able to get. So yeah, as I was just talking about there before, the difference between that confinement feeding and finishing lambs is very fast. And when we talk to clients over here and they are looking at an auto feeder, we've got to really distinguish with those particular customers. Do they want a confinement feed, or do they want to finish lambs? Because if we turn around and the wrong person talks to them and says, "Oh yeah, on our 70-foot unit, yeah, look, you can feed 840 lambs on that's no worries at all," but they're actually talking about confinement feeding, no, they can only fit 420 lambs on it. So we're very yeah, we've got to make sure that when we talk to the customers, we can really define what they want to do. And then if they actually want to do both, well, then we can option our unit up so they can also confinement feed as well as finishing lambs as well. So yeah, so confinement feeding was primarily used for drought management and pasture preservation. Confining stock, it basically just reduces that energy of that lamb by less walking. They've got the feed, they've got the water, and a couple of years ago we had bushfires in our area, so a lot of the stock was put back into that confinement area as well. So that was protecting the pastures. So those parts. And look, it's a really a strategic tool for confinement feeding as well. You know, as I said before, you can control your diet. Um, and over time, farmers have also learnt as well. We have more farmers now putting their ewes into the yard for joining. So for when we're joining with rams, they'll put them in the confinement yards for that. We also have farmers who will bring their ewes that are about to have a lamb. They'll put them into the confinement yard as well, just for extra protection, and so they can be. It's stress free. They've got the ability to have a good ration feed as well. So when you talk about finishing lambs, it's really more intensive, and we've got some big feedlots here in Australia. We're doing a project at the moment, and under roof, they will have just under 10,000 lambs under roof. And two of those units are for inducting. So inducting is when you are bringing lambs from a pasture area and you bring them into a confinement area or a lamb finishing area. You just can't put them onto grain and just fill them up full of grain because they'll get acidosis. So here in Australia, they'll either do they'll do an induction process anywhere from 7 to 14 days, and that could be out in the paddock by purely putting grain in what we call lick feeders over here. So that gets them used to getting onto the grain. So then when they come into the feedlot, their stomach's already used to that grain, and they will be able to put on weight easier. So we had to, with our auto feeders, we had to make some changes to that, just adapt to that for people who wanted to induct using an auto feeder as well. And so I'll go through a couple of slides with that later on what we did with our unit, so the customer could, they could induct with our unit, and then they could turn around and finish lands with our unit as well. Yeah, so over here at the moment, so with finishing lambs, the starting weight is normally about 77 pound. They enter the feedlot at about 77 pound. It sort of varies a little bit. They're even at the moment over here, they're trying to get lambs that are actually heavier. Um, they find that if they can put a heavier lamb in there as well, they'll still have them in the feedlot for up to 45 days, but they will put on a lot more weight each day. So yeah, so at the moment, so lambs enter at about 77 pound, and they take longer to finish than the heavier lambs, and that's exactly what we saw yesterday when we were at our client's place as well. And I was talking to some customers last week where now they're really trying to get that probably 88 pound plus lamb, and bring that into the feedlot. As I got here, the induction periods, it's got 14 to 21 days, but we tend to find that people will induct that 7 to 14 days. So yeah, there's been a little bit of a change over time. And with the high performing lambs, like in a feedlot, they can put anywhere from 10 to 14 ounces on per day, and they just finish a lot quicker being a heavier lamb, and and they'll just finish a lot faster, gaining, they will get up to that probably, yeah, around that 7 ounces per day when they really get to the end of finish. So that way they're in the feedlot less time, which means they're having to put less grain in them, so they're off to market, and they tend to get more profits that way, depending on what the market is and how they sell. There's also a push over here at the moment. We're getting a lot of people looking at putting our systems in because they've got a lot of abattoirs over here, meat production areas. They're looking for stock. They're actively looking for stock. So they're wanting people to put systems in and put lambs through their lamb finishing to help get stock through, because they're just finding that we're just not getting enough protein out there. So there's a real big push, but our price on lambs at the moment are quite high. So there's a very fine line between making money and breaking even, or if you do it wrong, actually losing money as well. As I've just on this slide here, I'm just sort of really going back over the head spacing for confinement feeding, the fact that there's only 40 head on that 10-foot trough system versus 120 head on the trough system if you're finishing lambs. As that picture shows there, when that unit comes on, they're all at the trough having a feed, where the one on the right, because it's more ad lib. And what I mean by ad lib is when you're fattening lambs, you're having the system coming on multiple times through the day because they just want to put weight on. So with our system, you can either put it in, you can do it by program. So you can say, I want to feed 6 times a day. So you can set 6 programs to feed 6 times a day. But we tend to run the unit on what we call ad lib mode. So the unit's on all the time, and there's a sensor in the trough, and we can put a delay on that sensor. So the feed will come through and hit the sensor and stop. When they eat away from that sensor, that will then trigger the unit to come on in whatever they've got their delay set for. A couple of the biggest factors when setting up confinement areas or feedlot area is pen size is very important, and water is very important as well. So in Australia, we've got various publications, and they talk about pen sizes, and the average space per head at the moment, when I talk to a lot of cockies, is about 54 square feet per head, or in Australia that works out to 5 meters per head. And they do say you can increase that out to 108 to 215 square feet per head. And by giving them more room, it means that they're not bunched in as much. There's less of that social stress. They tend to have less shy feeders because there's not so much competition to get onto the trough. But then you've also got to watch out when you have those big areas as well, because the bigger area they've got, the more walking they can do. And obviously when they turn to do a lot of walking, well, then they'll actually lose condition. But then if you go to the other end of the scale as well, they too talk about going down to 21.5 or up to 32 square feet per head. And that will reduce your dust levels. And that's because of obviously they're in a more confined space, so there's a lot more urine, there's manure, it's a lot more compactor. But by doing that as well, it does tend to cause a bit more social stress as well, and you do get more shy feeders. And if there is a health issue because they are so tight, you can get sickness through a flock as well. So talking to a lot of customers, we try and work on the pen size about that 54 square feet per head. And with our pen sizes, that can vary a fair bit, but they sort of tend to say 300 to 400 lambs per pen is a good number. So if in that case, if we had a pen 164 feet by 164 feet, which is about 27,000 square feet, that is a good pen size to have 500 head in there at about that 5 square meters per head. You can go larger, as I said, but yeah, that tends to be the size that we sort of aim for over here. And look, probably a lot of people underestimate the importance of water as well. Water is probably just as important as having the right feed mix. They really go hand in hand. And this is something which we've learnt over time and talking to a lot of customers, and we talk to a lot of animal nutritionalists, and even when I was yesterday as well, we're talking about water. So with water, we tend to try and have a trough, and I'm gonna about 22 gallons is a good trough size. And what they'll tend to do over here with our water troughs in a confinement area or finishing lambs is we will drop the water out of that trough probably once a day. Or sometimes some people do go out to 2 or 3 days, but it really depends on the condition that you're in at the moment. So you don't want to get a layer of dust on your trough on the top of the water, because that will stop your lambs from having water. And so poor quality water, which can be if you have your water trough too close to your feed source. So if you have it too close to your hay or too close to a trough system, they will eat out of the trough and then go straight to your water trough, and they will put what's in their mouth into that water trough. If it's windy, there'll be a layer of dust as well. So over here we definitely recommend that you drop your water at least once a day. Hence why we go to that 22-gallon water trough, because if you have too big of a water trough, you're dropping a lot of water out per day, and it's also cleaning that water trough as well. And we've even had some innovation here in Australia where some of the water troughs are actually putting aerators in them as well, so they're actually aerating and keeping that water nice and clean. And also we have as well as just dropping the water, they'll go and they'll clean the trough out as well. So they'll have a brush or something and clean that trough out. And one thing that we've done at Feedtech in the last probably 12 months is we've developed our own water trough, because we get a lot of people looking at want to buy our auto feeders, and they're asking about water trough. So we designed our own water trough, and it's got a 12 volt solenoid valve on it. And we can either hook that up to our advanced controller, or we've got another little controller with a solar panel and a battery, and we can set where that water trough will just automatically open up once a day, or they can set it for anywhere from 2 to 3 days as well. So we're just a lot of people underestimate the importance of the water side of things. So with Feedtech itself, just a little bit of history. So our main company is Travascus Engineering, and Travascus Engineering was established in 1959, and it was actually established by a local farmer's son, and he started doing some engineering works on a shed in the farm before he moved into town and created a little engineering business there. So it was a lot of farm. People would bring slashers in, they'd bring farm equipment in, and he'd do a lot of repairing of that. And definitely over time, it's changed. We've got anywhere between 45 and 50 staff now. So leading up to 1995, when Feedtech was established, Travascus Engineering was making feed systems for the dairy industry and roller mills and pencil augers for another company, and that other company decided that they wanted not to be in that agricultural space anymore. So Travascus Engineering created Feedtech feeding systems, and as I said earlier, we were mainly dairy systems, which we have a dealer network around Australia and New Zealand with about 24 dealers. And then in 2017 was when the auto feeder was really born, and we designed it. And because we've got the full engineering company, we've got our engineers, we've got our production. So we tend to do a lot of R&D. It just wasn't, well, let's make this auto feeder, it's going to work. We got an animal nutritionist involved. We looked at the trough system. And then when we sold our first unit, we went out there and assembled that unit as well and make sure that it all fitted together nicely. And from that, we've got to drop the roof down a little bit lower. Our roof's only about 1.2 meters high, and the roof on the auto feed is 1.4 meters wide. So we made a couple of little changes there. So, and with the auto feed, it's a little bit different, because with our dairy stuff, as I said, we sell through a dealer network. But initially, I was talking to the farmer or the rancher. He would ring me up and say, look, we're looking at something automotive. We want to feed our sheep. So, yep, got the engineers together. I drew a little picture. We came up with something. We sold it direct to that farmer. And normally what happens is, yep, that farmer sees it, and then we put some on social media back then. But normally the way that we got our growth was the farmer next door would see what his neighbour was doing, and he'd buy a unit, and then their other neighbour would buy a unit. So we've got real clumps around Australia where I used to have a map with a pin in it, and I'd put one unit there, and then all of a sudden there'll be units around. So we made the decision there, just we would sell direct to the rancher. We didn't want to go through a dealer network. And here in Australia, we've got various merchandise stores that, they sell merchandise. They do livestock selling. They do agronomy as well, services. But we decided that, no, we'll sell direct to the cocky, because we really wanted to make sure that when a unit got sold to the rancher, I call them a cocky sometimes, when they got sold to the rancher, that we were selling the right length unit to that particular customer. Or if they had an issue, they would come straight back to us and ask us a question. And even over time, we've developed our Facebook page. When a customer first buys an auto feeder off us, we invite them to our Feedtech support hub, so which is just a closed Facebook page. And so customers can get on there. They can ring us, but they'll also might ask other auto feeder owners a question, or how do they do this and how do they do that? And so, yeah, we believe it was the right decision just to keep selling direct to the farmer. And it's a bit like what I did yesterday. I went out on farm. I talked to that farmer. How you going? And he'll give me some feedback on our social medias. We're quite open to feedback from current owners or people if they want to try something differently. Our business over the last since 2017 has had some huge growth, and it started around the auto feeders, and we do a lot of mixing systems now as well, where people are pulling different grains out of different feed bins and it gets mixed, and then that'll go up into a big silo or a big feed bin, or it'll go directly out to an auto feeder. So as it stands at the moment, we've got about 450 plus auto feeders sold around Australia. So pretty much every state and a territory. And they could be anywhere from we never sell a 10-foot unit, but our most common units are 70-foot auto feeder. And and with our dealer network for our dairy side of things, we've still got our 24 dairy dealers. And interesting note, we have sold 2 auto feeders overseas, and one is actually in Stillwater, Oklahoma. There's a unit there, and hence why we made our trip in 2024. And we've actually recently sold one into Paraguay as well. So with our auto feeders, we have a 110 volt unit, or we have a 24 volt DC solar unit. Anywhere from 10 foot to 190 foot long. And we also offer a mobile unit as well, which we developed over here. So a customer has got the ability to take that out to the paddock and fill that up. And this is sort of how an auto feeder works. So what we've got here is we've got our feed bin at one end. We've got our control cabinet at the other end. So the feed is actually being pulled towards the control cabinet, where we have a sensor in the trough. And that sensor is what the feed hits, which will stop it. So obviously in pick A and pick B, you'll see that coiled spring. That's what they call centerless auger. And that sits inside that PVC. It's a grade 12 PVC, and that's got slots in it. So that's what the feed is being pulled along, and then it's dropping out of those slots. And then pick D is our standard controller. That particular unit's a 240 volt or 110 volt unit. And then pick C is a variation that we did, that's a flap system that closes over the trough system. So if you did want a confinement feed and you wanted to control your feed more before the trough system actually starts, that flap system would close over the trough. Some of the advancements, we've just developed a new controller for our auto feeders. Just going to be a lot easier for the farmer if they want to, for their induction, or if they want to ad lib feed, they can just put the number of head they want to feed, how much per head they want to feed out per day, and hit the button, and the unit would automatically do it. If they want to do an induction, they can pick how many days they wanted to induct over, and then how much they want to feed out per head per day, and the unit will just automatically do it. Our advancements, as I've said, we've got our water trough, which we've just developed, and we're just developing a new 30-foot modular mobile auto feeder as well. So our other auto feeder, when we send out direct to the cocky, it's already fully assembled. Where this one is going to be, it's going to be 30 foot. It's going to have a 100 bushel hopper, but it's something that we can send overseas to America, I'd like to think, or to other parts of Australia as well. That's just a little bit of a map in Australia of where our auto feeders are. Like I said, there's over 450 plus units. Really, what we've learnt in Australia is in drought, we adapted, we made changes, we looked at the way that we wanted to feed our stock. We looked at the type of feeding, so we looked at confinement feeding, we looked at feedlotting, we looked at the equipment that we had on the market, and hence that's why we developed the auto feeder as well. So you've got the automation, it's labour saving, but more importantly, you're getting the right amount of feed out there, so you don't have that feed wastage as well. And as I said before, normally it is when you're in drought, that's when grain is cheap. So really be able to feed your sheep at a good price, and if you are looking at finishing lambs, to get those good returns as well. Pretty well, most cases, what we've adapted here in Australia can be definitely adapted in the States as well. You might look at what ration formulation you got over there, what stock, obviously climates, what state regulations you have, and some local veterinary advice as well. But yeah, the unit that we sent over to Oklahoma, the only thing we had to really do is put a 110-volt motor on there, and everything else worked as well. So look, if anyone's got any questions, by means, ask me. And like Hamara said earlier as well, we are really looking to try and partner with someone in the States. We did make our trip in 24, and we just find the most cost-effective way we'll be able to partner with someone in the States, and to be able to send container loads over and be able to distribute them in the States. Where the first one we sent over from here as a whole unit we had it palletized up, but cost-effective wise, freight wise, it wasn't the best. So our long-term aim is to be able to get more units into the American market. And that's it.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you so much, David. What is the experience for small farmers? I know this is, let me ask again the question. So what is the size of your farmers? So do you have big farmers, or do you have also small farmers in Australia with the small ruminants, with sheep and goats?
Yeah, look, it's originally we still sell. We sell a lot of we would have small to middle farmers mainly. And acre wise, that's probably it could be 1,000 acres, could be an average farm. But then as we go along, 4,000 acre farms. Sheep numbers vary because we still have a lot of farmers over here cropping as well as running stock, and we're finding that more and more farmers in different areas are definitely getting back into stock. We had that thing where the older farmer used to run a lot of stock years ago. Then the sons have come onto the farm and they wanted to drive tractors and drive harvesters. But now we've found that there's a lot more people getting back into stock so they can diversify their farming. But yeah, look, we've got my average unit that I would sell would be a 70-foot unit, which would handle 840 head. That's our average unit. But then I sell some 190-foot units, which if you're finishing lambs, that would feed 2,280 head. So it's a real cross between, and we are seeing there is a bit more money being spent in the corporate world as well. Like this big system we've got going down in southern Victoria, which they're going to have 10,000 head under roof. That's a huge system. So there is a bit more corporate money being spent, and with some larger feedlots being set up.
Yeah, the question is because many of the farmers here in Missouri, at least in some other states, are small farmers. They may have 50, 100, or even less than that animal units. And so sometimes we wondering the competition that we have with Australia and New Zealand. And so because the market, so Jennifer can correct me, but A lot of the meat that we consume here is from Australia, from New Zealand, from lamb and from goat. And and the people say, well, what I have to do to reduce my cost and what I have to do to be managing the risk that I have when I have a drought, when I don't have enough food, or even sometimes to get a better price in the market, you have to be feeding the animals during the winter, that here is very cold. And sometimes you are practicing some kind of feedlot anyway, and during the winter, because you are not grazing, so you can be taking advantage of this system during the winter. So there is several things that we maybe just considering about it. Yeah. Are there some other
Yeah, and
things?
that's sort of why and that's probably the beauty of our system, is the fact they're only 10-foot lengths. Because the unit that we sent over was a 40-foot unit. And he put our feed control system flaps on and a couple other bits and pieces, it was only a small unit, and that's what we found when we went to the States. There wasn't huge flocks, and so yeah, we think there's a market there, but it's going to be nowhere near Australia. But we also found that, just talking to a lot of people, we went to the Lamb and Goat Expo in San Angelo, and we're just talking to a lot of people there, and we participated in that as well. And one thing we found is probably the mindset as well in the States with the rancher. Now, and I hope I'm not saying this wrong, but because their grandfather did it away and their father did it a certain way, well, they'll do it that way as well. It's, they weren't really looking at our alternatives to, well, how can we better farm? How can we get our flocks bigger? But to be able to get, to create an income, to be able to sell their product, but also do it in a cost-effective way, because you want to try and cut your labour costs out. You want to cut your feed wastage out as well, and that's probably in Australia they've really adapted to that. And I've been involved in the ag industry for many years, and the Australian farm is pretty resilient. You will have people looking at different ways of doing things. And that's what they had to do. If they wanted to keep their flock in 2017, and not sell it or give it away or lose money on it, they had to really look at alternatives of what they can do. And that's sort of where our auto feeders were really born.
Yeah.
David, do you find it similar there in Australia, maybe prior to the big droughts, that farmers do things kind of the way they've always done things until they're forced to change?
Yeah, it was definitely, and I sort of look at the age group. It's a bit hard because we've sold a lot of units over the years, but the age group's really been varied. But you would nearly say be probably 30 years and above. 30 years old and above would really, the young, we get a couple of younger people in, but they're still young and energetic, so they don't mind going out there, and they're not sort of worried about the labor intensive side of things. Where it was really interesting yesterday where I went, and I've spoken to these customers for a little while, and they bought the unit 12 months ago, but they really look at the data. They're very, they could tell you, how much feed they've put into them, how much it's cost them, what they're selling it for. So I think there is a real mixture, but I'd say, yeah, the farmers over here, they had to adapt. And I think it's also, it was really that if I sold a unit to that rancher there, and what the farming communities are like, and the neighbour was seeing what he did, oh yeah, that's a good idea, and that's how we ended up selling that unit. And it's, look, so for us, social media, which was Facebook way back then as well, and we're still very proactive on Facebook and social media. that's where it also helped us to get out. We try and not say that we're selling an auto feeder. We're trying to sell a feeding solution for them. It's not just about selling that. It's also, if you buy that, what's the advantages of buying that? And the labour saving is just a huge one. In Australia, we use a product called a lick feeder, or it could be a 1 or 2 ton bin, and they're out in the paddock, so they've got to go out in every 2 or 3 days and fill them up. Mm-hmm. Where if you put up an auto feeder and it's got say a 30 odd ton silo, they're not touching the unit. Well, they've still got to go and check the unit every day. Still got to go and have a look at the unit, check the troughs, make sure the stock's all right. But that's all they've got to do. They've just got to set their unit up and they're right. And I did have I don't know where my little note before, but yeah, so I sort of roughly worked it out before. If someone, a 40-foot unit here in Australia is about $14,000 ex tax. We've got to put a tax on that. So a 40-foot unit is about $14,000, and if you're fattening lambs, that would fatten 480 lambs. So when they sort of work the sums back on that, the infrastructure cost it's not a huge cost either. We prefer if you put it on a concrete slab. Obviously, you've got to get some water troughs, you've got to do some fencing, but the infrastructure isn't that expensive. So if they actually turn around the next year and the land prices weren't that great, or they didn't have their own flock coming through, they just wouldn't use that feedlot that year. But it'd be there for when they did get some stock at the right price, or a lot of people over here are opportunists as well. So they might have their feedlot already set up, and next thing they've got the ability to buy some cheap sheep. Yep, beauty. They can just whack them into the feedlot and away they go. They've already got that infrastructure there. But yeah, as a whole, I'd say our farmers over here, and even if I sort of think about it more, I should probably go back and try and get an age demographic, but I reckon it's probably 50 years older and plus would be that age group that we've sold a lot of our units to, which is good. It's means that they are forward thinking, and then when their kids go onto the farm as well, their dad's quite proactive.
That's
I should
nice.
say not just dad. I should say dad, mum and dad. Actually, over here we find that there's a big shift probably 20 years ago from my ag machinery days where the salesman used to go up the driveway and they just speak to the dad, or they speak to the man. Where we've found the last 20 or 30 years where I'd always tell a salesman when they're going up a driveway, it's the man isn't the important one. The wife's the important one. They're both in business together. And that's what we've found over here over the years is, it's a real family decision now, or a mum and dad decision. It's not just the farmer, the bloke going off and buying a tractor and come home and say, hey, dear, I've just bought a new tractor. It's a real business decision nowadays.
Okay. Is there any question in the chat?
There was just the one question, if your product has any coccidia stats for lambs.
Any, sorry, what?
I'm worried I'm not saying this word right.
That's right. Coccidia stats.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Coccidia stats.
And that's why I made the comment on there that they're not selling feed. That'd be something we added to feed, not the feed.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, when it comes to the nutrition and the feed side of things, we don't offer advice. There's a couple of feed companies we might deal with, or because we find in Australia, because it's such a big country, you've got a lot of different feed companies, and we try and we don't offer nutritional advice because we don't want to tell someone, yeah, you could use that feed or you could use that feed, you could use it at that percentage, and because we're not qualified, we're not trained, we don't want to kill lambs, so we don't give advice. But the only advice we can tell is the customer is, because we use a centerless auger, it's really got to be a small grain. If they do use a Faber bean, or if they do use a lupin, it's got to be cracked. It's got to be broken down so it can fit through the slots. And you can't use over there in the States, you had I think it was cottonseed, wasn't it? Cottonseed. which gets used a fair bit, and the cottonseed still got a little bit of cotton on it. So it wouldn't run through our system. It would, because it wouldn't be able to drop through the slots.
So you're talking more of a pelleted feed or
Yeah, pelleted, or they just do a mixed feed. Very common over here is a barley, which might be at about probably 80%. They might put a lupin in there, cracked lupin, which is about probably 15%, and then they'll have a buffer pellet as well, and the buffer pellet's normally about 5%. But then they could put corn through it. It could be beans. There's multiple. Even yesterday where I was, they had there was a small bit of molasses in there as well, but you couldn't tell it when you're picking up the grain. It was still fell through, but they were putting that molasses in there, which is really a taste thing for the lambs. So the lambs just like that taste and they just want to eat the feed.
Gotcha.
Okay, well, I think we are over time. Thank you so much.
I do have the winners from the
Yeah.
raffle for last week. Our winners from last week were Haley Janetschek, Maggie Winspear, and Pam Fox.
Okay, great. So what is the next, Jennifer? Which one is the next?
I believe Dr. Dan Codros is next, correct?
Yeah, so next Monday. He
Next
will be
Monday,
talking
it'll be
about
our last webinar.
Yeah, he will be talking about nutrition and some effects on their tenderness and meat quality. So, well, thank you so much for this time. Thank you from Australia. Thank you and greetings.
No worries. Thank you very much for the invite.
Yeah.
Hope you have a great day today while we're all heading home.
Now I'm about to head to a conference. About to head to a conference for lambs, so we'll see if I can learn a bit more today.
It'll be a
Okay.
good day then.
Well,
Thank you. See you. Bye.
bye.
Thank you. Bye.